Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Echoes of War. This is Craig from the Pacific War Channel, joined here by my co-host Gareth. How are you?
Hey Greg, great to be on here and looking forward to Blast to the Past.
Yeah, and this is going to be one that maybe a lot of people haven't heard of. I think ask anybody anything about history, and most people will tell you they at least know about Alexander the Great, but not so many people know about his arguably more important father. I would argue, kind of, Philip II.
I'm definitely with you on that.
Yeah,
It's
you get a lot of heat when you start bringing that stuff up, though, like for sure. And I'll just say this before we get into it. My channel before it was the Pacific War Channel was called NBS History, and the first episode I ever did was Alexander the Not So Great. So people, this is a blast from the past for me, and I'm ready to get shit on again by everybody. Like what happened years and years ago. It was a lot of fun. But before we jump into it, I just want to say if you'd like to further support the channel, please consider checking out the YouTube membership or our Patreon account at www.patreon.com/the Pacific War Channel. By joining either, you get access to the exclusive podcast series, early access to all the content I make, and voting rights for the subjects I will tackle next. And I just finished the latest exclusive podcast episode. It's going to be on the government by assassination, which is a really messed up period in Japanese history where more or less young Japanese officers began killing politicians, businessmen, and even high-ranking military officials, trying to basically do a an overthrow of the government. And I won't get into too much of that, but yeah, it's a very interesting time period, and I'm really
it
I'm
includes a
happy
prime
with it.
minister. It includes a prime minister.
And they killed, let me see, three, depending the time. I think they killed about four prime ministers amongst many other
Okay.
ministers, like a lot of people. And they tried to
Okay.
kill Charlie Chaplin. That's a weird one. They almost killed him. They thought
Now
it.
that is one part I'm definitely looking forward to.
They thought it would cause a war with the United States. I mean, these are 20-year-old kids in the army. Yeah, 20-year-olds, officers in the army. They were putting together this plan. So, yeah, it was interesting. But we're going to be jumping into, I think, one of the most pivotal battles in history, one that really set the stage for ancient history. I don't want to give away too much, but this is involving a time period in which the father of Alexander the Great, Philip II of Macedonia or Macedonia, whichever way you like to pronounce it, was trying to consolidate his grasp over what is Greece. And it's going to all culminate in a very decisive battle against a very fierce coalition. And that's all I'm going to say. And I'll let you kick it off, Garev.
Sure. Thanks, Greg. So I think as the pictures is displaying, we are going to be talking about the Battle of Chaeronea, which will represent the apex of Philip II of Macedon. And completely concurring with your opening statement, Greg, it's unfortunate that he is remembered solely as the father of Alexander the Great, as if not for the way he set up and established Macedonia as such a powerful force. Like it was prepared to take on the Achaemenid and the Persian Empire, right? If it wasn't, he would have been remembered as a genius if not for his even more brilliant militaristic son. He took the solid foundations laid by the father and perfected it. That's how I view it.
A lot of people would say that Philip II made the army that Alexander would use to conquer Persia.
He did. He set the foundation. Alexander definitely tweaked and improved on it, but
Yeah.
the core was still its. You could make the same case as how Marius created the legions that Caesar would be using in structure and everything, but Caesar perfected its use compared to Marius.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so let's dwell into this. So we are now in the mid of the 4th century BC, and right now Greece, in its ever political rivalry war state, is not dominated by Sparta or Athens. In the two city states everyone knows that were the powerhouses of Greece. It is dominated by Thebes. And that's a shock, right? Because at the turn of just before the turn of the 5th century, Athens had been crushed in the Second Peloponnesian War, and Sparta was the undisputed power in Greece. But Sparta would be losing because of the way it just managed itself, right? With their very rigid hierarchy and way of life, that they were always going to be a shrinking power. I think this is like a great example I remember reading. At the peak of the Darius and Xerxes invasion, Sparta technically had a soldier pool of 20,000 men. At the time of this battle, Sparta could just muster a little over 1,000 citizen soldiers. And 100 years later, even though they still try to be defiant, when the Romans took over Greece, Sparta was just kind of like an exotic tourist village.
I mean, yeah, that's whenever there's a chart, there's a really famous chart that shows the basically the decline of Sparta, and it's when it's when the Helots rebelled that really put in the nail in the coffin to their entire population. But my God, did they fell off and they would never come back.
At least Athens did recover as a power. I'll give them
Of
that.
course,
So,
yeah.
anyways, in the aftermath of the Second Peloponnesian War, Sparta was already starting to decline, especially with the very inconclusive Corinthian War, which lasted from 395 to 386 BC. And this allowed Thebes to look at, uh, expanding its influence. So Thebes has always been the Boeotian League, that is kind of like, the area just slightly north of Athens. Um, I'm trying to find a good map. So around here would be the Boeotian League, and Thebes was always really their masters. And for a long time, Thebes was kind of hated in Greece since they openly supported the Persians in the invasion.
I mean, historically, it always turns out it's like all the rumors in Greece is the Thebans are the ones taking Persian gold. It always is them first.
Well, let's not forget that Sparta did that to win the Second Peloponnesian War.
No one talks about that.
True enough. Now, as Thebes wants to rise in power, it has some critical advantages working in its favor. One is they have two oligarchs, Epaminondas and Pelopidas, who are fully committed to an aggressive foreign policy for Thebes. And I think, Craig, you do have a little bit of Epaminondas. Now, while he's not directly related to the Battle of Chaeronea, I think his legacy definitely lives on in this battle. So maybe you could say a few words about him.
Yeah, I'm just gonna bring up a picture. Unfortunately for this individual, I could only find a bust. Well, it's a full
That's
statue.
fine.
It's a full statue, mind you. Oh yeah, we should say we always forget. For the audience who's listening to this on an audio platform, Gaurav has, I think, I'm counting about 20 tabs open of maps and pictures. So it might be really helpful to consider watching us over on YouTube. And we're really trying to make this more of a visual component because I'm going to be blunt. It really supports the channel furthermore on YouTube than it does on these audio platforms. I get more ad revenue through YouTube and I can just fund more ventures that we're doing. That's really the basis of it. And I think it actually allows for more comprehension because sometimes we're covering geography that no one really would know anything about. Like our Malayan campaign episode, I guarantee very few people know the geography of Malaya.
Or Battle of Grunwald, for example.
Yeah, for me, I recently wrote some Russian Civil War content, and I still don't understand the geography completely. It's very confusing. But yeah, this individual, what's his pronunciation of his name? Epaminondas? Epa?
Yeah,
Epaminondas. As you said, he's a highly influential Theban general and a statesman. Because back then, you were not just a
it
military
is the same
commander.
thing.
Yeah, it's like the Roman system. It's like you're both most of the time. I think there was very few generals who didn't have political careers. And he was known to be quite innovative when it came to military strategies. I think it's hard for people who know a little bit about Greek history to understand that the Thebans were one of the powerhouses always. They were they highly contested some of the other powers, and I mean they lost a lot of battles, but they dished out quite a few victories. So they're definitely in the top tier of the Greek city-states. But he claims leadership of the Theban hegemony, and he plays a crucial role, actually, like you mentioned, ending the Spartan dominance in Greece. So, I mean, it's kind of a weakened Spartan by this point. And he initially rose to prominence in the early 4th century BCE. He was instrumental in the formation of key alliances that would strengthen Thebans, against their rivals. And the Thebans had a lot of rivals. The Thebans were kind of the most hated of the states, I'd say, in Greece.
That's
Uh,
true.
yeah. His most significant achievement came at the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BCE, where he devised a new tactical formation, an oblique phalanx, allowing the Thebans to decisively defeat the Spartans and liberate Macedonia. This victory shifted the balance of power in Greece, and it established the Thebans as, a major player. He would
I'll just add a little bit.
yeah.
That was pretty good before I get into the Battle of Lectura because the tactics are going to be influential there.
Hmm.
But he was also pretty good. He launched four invasions of the Peloponnesian
Yeah.
Peninsula. And I think one of the most interesting things was he is also a pretty good orator.
Hmm.
So in 370 BC, 369 BC, after the first invasion of the Peloponnese, he, you know, he needed to be and wanted several of him and several of the Boeotarchs to remain in power after their term to continue and prosecute the campaign effectively.
Yeah.
So Boeotarch is just the Theban word for general.
Oh, yeah, there you
So
go.
it's just kind of like you can think of it as a legate in Roman terms or strategos in the Athenian terms.
Hmm.
And upon his return after the successful prosecution of the invasion, he was not greeted as a hero, but his political enemies put a trial. Like, you're breaking the law. Screw you. Now, according to Cornelius Nepos in his defense, he requests that if he's to be executed, his inscription regarding the verdict should read, he was punished by the Thebans with death because he obliged them to overthrow the Lacedaemonians at Lectura, whom, before he was general, none of the Boeotians durst look upon in the field, and because he not only by one battle rescued Thebes from destruction, but also secured liberty for all Greece and brought the power of both people to such a condition that the Thebans attacked Sparta and the Lacedaemonians were content if they could save their lives. Nor did he cease to prosecute the war till after seeing Messana, he shut up Sparta with a close siege. After this, it was said the jury just broke out in laughter, and yeah, he considered he would be prosecuting several more invasions of the Peloponnese. It really worked out in his favor. Now, this is a battle that actually shatters the Spartan mirage because everyone has this thing. The Spartans are the ultimate super soldiers. They are fearless. And when they died because they were grossly outnumbered, like 10,000 to one and everything, right? But Lectura is definite proof that the Spartans were not the supreme soldiers that they are made out to be. They are good, but they're not drastically better than any Athenian or Theban or Corinthian or Argos hoplite. Right? Because since all the men had to provide for their own equipment in this time, you got to be pretty rich and fit, anyways, in that ancient world to even be able to afford and equip such armor. A lot of these men spent time in the gymnasiums and everything in all acropolises across the country. So to me, they're not supremely better soldiers, but they do have a much more stricter code of honor and conduct, and that does breed into better discipline. But at the Battle of Lectura, the Spartans engaged with an army of around 10,000 infantry and 1,000 cavalry, whereas the Theban and their allied forces numbered around 8,000, 7,500 to 8,000 men. Now, the battle opened with these mercenary peltists of Sparta attacking and driving the Boeotian camp followers and others who were reluctant to fight. Now, Xenophon, the key source, he says were trying to the camp followers of the Boeotians, that is the Thebans, were trying to leave the field as they did not intend to fight. The Spartan action drove them in back into the Theban battle line, which actually reinforced the Theban line because now they have nowhere to go. Now there followed the cavalry engagements, which the Thebans drove them off the field. Initially, the Spartan infantry was sent into disarray when the retreating cavalry disrupted the attempt to outflank the Theban left. Right. How many times have you seen, disarrayed cavalry just marching straight through advancing infantry? And at this point, the Theban left hit the Spartan right with the sacred band. It's a unit I will get into. And and this is the decisive engagement between the Theban and Spartan infantry. Now, the normal practice of the Spartans and most Greeks was to establish the phalanx, 8 to 12 men deep, just a solid block of infantry with your more nimble units and cavalry generally on your flanks to protect them. Because as we discussed in our Roman episode, when the Romans use the phalanx, they still suffer the same weakness. You get into the flanks or rear of the phalanx, you're toast. Now, this was supposed to be now 8 to 12 ranks deep was considered the best balance between the depth, that is the push, the forward power, the forward momentum. The more men you have, the deeper your ranks, the more power you get to push forward, and width, right? You don't want to give the enemy any chance of outflanking you. Now, the infantry would be advancing together, so you have to maintain the line cohesion. This is difficult even in open, flat terrain and almost impossible if there's even some amount of broken ground. Now, because of the kind of drift that would happen to the right, so the Greek commanders traditionally put their best and experienced and deadliest troops in this. So this was like how the place of honors started being born. Whereas the left troops, the left wing, absolute left, had the weakest and most ill-equipped troops. Therefore, in the Spartan battle plans, their elite forces were on the right, but the Thebans, knowing that the Spartans are going to deploy in traditional formation, they placed their best units, including the sacred band, on their right to oppose the Spartans. Now, what Epaminondas changed was he massed his cavalry and infantry together, which is not unheard of. They're side by side. And this wing is 50 men deep.
Jeez.
I
Yeah.
think I have an image. Um, I think you could see
Yeah.
this. So you can see the block is pretty obvious that this is the depth of the Theban army.
Hmm.
And then he sent this against the Spartan right. And his shallow and weaker center and right wings were drawn up so that they were progress. So he's fighting the best of the Spartans head up. But to counter this, he's obviously thrown in numbers. And these guys are just basically going to be pinning down the enemy. All right. And they would move forward in an echelon formation. Right. That is why, as you mentioned, it is the staggered line. The Thebans center right were held back and screened by skirmishers. And this mass of infantry just smashed through the Spartan right wing. Right. And they cannot sustain the 12-man deep formation, can't sustain against a 50-man deep formation. And it was destroyed. And the Spartans were thrown back with heavy losses with about 1,000 men, including 400 full Spartan citizen soldiers, including the king of Sparta, one of the kings. Cleombrotus was killed. Now, this is what sent the rest of the Spartan forces and their allies into a panic, and the Thebans took the day. And it's estimated that the Theban and their allies lost maybe 200, 300 men, whereas the Spartan and their allied losses is including their king and many citizen soldiers, over almost 4,000 men. This is almost on an army of 12,000. So now, why is this important? Because when he was a young man, King Philip of Macedon was a hostage slash guest of Thebes. He studied under Epaminondas. Epaminondas, sorry. I know I've butchered the name horribly, but it is studying under him and learning from him. Philip got the core, that spark, which he would use when he would take over Macedonia to reform the kingdom and make it that eventual juggernaut that we all know. So it was after this battle that Thebes was the dominant power in Greece, but due to the oligarchy and instability of the Greek political climate, he was not really able to allow Thebes to really fully exploit its gains. It's the same way as after the Second Peloponnesian War, we had the Spartan general Lysander, who was key in defeating Athens unable to really enforce his full, utter humiliation and dominance of Athens, which many Spartan elites, including the kings and other generals, did not want. They just wanted Athens to be like, beneath them, but they don't want to totally embarrass them. So this is where I think I would just say like, Thebes definitely showed its dominance over Sparta to take the rule of Greece. And it also disproves the fact that the Spartan soldiers are not the elite super soldiers in terms of strength and everything, since they outnumbered the Theban forces and still lost. So I think now that we've established what Thebes' power is in the build up to this conflict, we need to definitely look at Macedonia. Now, Macedonia was a northern state here, as we could see, and they were considered quite barbaric to the Greeks who did not consider themselves equals. They are barbarians. They are beneath us.
I mean,
So they,
for the audience sake, like the rest of the Greek city-states would literally say they are uncivilized because there's certain norms that they don't comply with.
like drinking undiluted wine.
That's one of the biggest ones, ironically, eh? They were just drinking undiluted wine. They were like, "Oh, you barbarians, you drink too heavy."
It is true, though, that was one of the big reasons. And for ancient Greeks, if I'm not mistaken, anyone was a barbarian if they were not from Greece. It's
Of
plain and
course.
simple. So Macedonians were not, even though they had probably some amount of close relations due to the proximity you would, especially at least with the Thessalians and all, they would be engaging in various trades and skirmishes as well.
Yeah.
But unfortunately for them, the Greeks never viewed them as such. Now, in the past, also Macedonia was kind of like a satrap or ally of Persia. So during Xerxes and Darius' invasion, they
Mm-hmm.
did openly support the Persians, even though and King Alexander the First, yep, Alexander
Yeah.
the Great, not the first. He provided military support to Xerxes, and they fought with the Persians at Plataea. And he was actually even used as a treaty to before Plataea and after Salamis to kind of be the negotiator between the Greeks and everything. Now, it is said the Macedonians came under King Tyrannus in this region in the 7th century BC. And, Homer claimed that they claimed it in the name of their god. Now, language is not the only barrier between the northern and southern regions of Macedonia. So there was also quite a big divide between the two. Uh, so Herodotus says, the first king Perdiccas was a descendant of Temenus, was a descendant of Hercules. So you claim your legitimacy, that means you're supposed to be Greek, right? Now, it's just kind of like a messy history and all that claims. Now, the Macedonians did want Greek approval, but they also were kind of aloof. So, like the King Alexander the First, as I mentioned, he tried to link himself to the Greeks, through, marriages and all in the past and ancestry, so that it's like, he can be accepted. But, it never really worked. The Greeks always looked down on them, even though like a lot of Macedonian kings were big patrons and big lovers of art, poetry, and such. And a lot of these, artisans and such, they got really rich just serving the Macedonian kings. And to the Greeks, the land is important because it has resources. The people, yeah, not so much. Now, you had the highlands and the lowlands. So the crops from the lowlands and the timber from the highlands were kind of like, the main exports of the Macedonians. And it kind of really um, coalesced into many cities that kind of would be ruled from Pella after a while. But it kind of also worked in the simple thing that the regional governors and administrators had a lot more autonomy than anyone else. And interesting, the Macedonians also used coins only from the 5th century. Otherwise, they used to use the barter system. And they had no slave concepts at all in Macedonia. So to the Greeks, that's apparently like, the biggest crime or something. But
Filthy
as I said,
barbarians.
yep, we don't believe they don't enslave people. What kind of pathetic, useless people are these, right? Now, in 360, this is like I think the showing the pits of Macedonia, right? The king Perdiccas III had been defeated by the Illyrians, so the tribesmen from here, and Perdiccas and about 4,000 Macedonians were killed in the battle. And you have now the Illyrians invading. The Pannonians are also invading, and the Thracians also decided to invade in support of one of the pretenders to the throne, uh, you know, Posaunissas, and as were the Athenians, who were supporting another pretender to the throne, named Argias. So, in short, they're screwed. They're pretty much being assailed from all fronts. Now, one thing in Macedonia, you need to have like a royal family pedigree or at least membership of an influential family to claim the throne. That's so you don't need to be directly descended, but if you are influential enough, you could be taken over. Now, the official heir was the son of Perdiccas, his son Amintas IV, who was at that time still a infant. Now, Philip was the uncle to this young infant and was the obvious candidate. And it seems that the army took him when he returned, and that they said the army said, "Yeah, that guy's our king." As if you're the nobles, you really don't have much of a choice, right? And some say he was either acclaimed as king at first, or he was initially acclaimed as regent, but then usurped the monarchy and took the throne for him and his own dynasty. But if he did do that, Amantius was not at all harmed. That is a known fact. So by 359 BC, he is now the king of a really weakened state of Macedonia and works tirelessly to get the kingdom up and running. Now, I think some of the great things we obviously know is the army's changes that he informed. Now, the tactics and the way that they would be fighting and deployment of the infantry was taken from Epaminondas himself. And this is why I wanted to bring him up in the first place. He served as inspiration. And the Thebans also were using slightly longer spears, nothing drastic compared to the Spartans, which gave their phalanx even more power in the offense, which was another spark of inspiration. And the close use of cavalry and cooperation, which until that time in the Greek world was practically unheard of. Now, as I said, the army was pretty bad and they are beset by complete enemies. And so it's said that at the start of the reign, that the army had about 10,000 infantry and maybe 1,000 cavalry at most. That's it. So if we consider that was a size which was also mentioned in the 5th century, it means that the disaster that Perdiccas suffered was catastrophic. Now, so he starts unifying the troops, and first and foremost, one of the key reforms. He creates an intelligence service. Right. These guys are going to be spreading propaganda when the army's not on campaign. They're going to be his scouts. They're going to be, spies, so that they can, give him intelligence and whereabouts and how best to move his army. As we know, this is going to be a very important facet of warfare for anybody. The second was he created an engineering corps, and it is said that he was the creator of the torsion catapults, and a lot of siege engines were going to be built under him. And you will see that the Macedonian army, even under Alexander the Great, when he fought the Illyrians, He even used the catapults, I think, in direct fire support for his withdrawing soldiers, which I think is supposed to be the first recorded use of an artillery weapon in live field to support the soldiers and not be used in a siege. Now, and here he also professionalized the army so that they are now standing soldiers. They don't have to work the field, they don't have to do anything, they're just going to do. And he enforces a lot of discipline and training so that the men are accustomed to, and this is the universal approach he's taken for both cavalry and infantry. So there are route marches, there's fitness tests, there's drilling, formation, training, everything, right? I think at some points, route marches in training were 60 to 65 kilometers long per day.
Holy shit. Yeah, it's pretty intense.
Yeah. And, he does want to form a full Macedonian army. So he is willing to get, invited military families throughout Greece to settle. And this is also going to serve as a balance to the Macedonian elite. Because these guys are also going to be getting powers that will make them contenders and a counter check to the Macedonian families who are known to be plotting and always scheming against their kings. Right? That's typical. Now, the main targets of his early attacks would be Amphipolis, which is around here, which is where he starts his long wars with Athens, I might add. Now, he also reforms the baggage train because he drastically reduces the number of camp followers and wagons. He says the number of camp servants that will follow the army is one man for every 10 infantry soldier and one for each cavalry, nothing more. Lesser people, faster mobility. So the speed of march improved. So the cavalry is organized and obviously our very famous Hetaira or the companion cavalry. These are the elites. They and you have a picture of these cavalry. Yeah. So these are like, without stirrups, but are still the finest horsemen in the Greek world at this time, and even probably the world with the spears. And they are going to become the famous hammer to the tactics that Alexander will be using. So they were in squadrons of 200 men, and the royal squadron, which commanded by the king, would be 300 strong. Later, you would also have the Thessalian heavy cavalry, which was after Philip manages to capture the area of Thessaly and subjugate it. And they would be providing the bulk of the allied cavalry. So together, these two units are the top notch and most of the cavalry that the Macedonians used. The foot soldiers is where we start to see Philip's reforms really start to take place. As we've discussed, the hoplite was a heavy infantryman. He had now this is the Pheasantyroi, which was a standard unit. This is kind of more akin to what a hoplite would look like. Right? He had a big hoplon, metal breastplate, shin pads, and usually they would also have greaves. They had a helmet, spear, and they would also be having like a dagger and a sword as well. But the entire gear together is about 25, 30 kgs. Right? The shield itself was quite a brute knocking force. So what Philip does is he reduces the armor that the foot companions of the Pheasantyroi will wear. So they just have more of a linen tunic, as you can see here, a much smaller shield than their hoplite brethren. And more importantly, they get the sarissa, as you can see here at this part, like this part of the image. It is not a spear. It's a pike. It's a two-handed pike. And this gives the Macedonians a massive advantage in the phalanx battles because it depends on the number of spears you can push forward and the staying power. Now this allows the sarissa was about 20 feet long. In comparison, most hoplite spears were between 7 to 10 feet. Usually it's around 8. You have 2.5 times the reach. So your men are safe, but you are like, stabbing the enemy right in the face. It was kind of unwieldy. So they needed both their hands to operate the sarissa, which is why if you can actually notice here, there is a kind of sling that he's wearing across his chest armor. And that is actually a sling to help them equip the shield on the left, like a typical phalanx formation, because you need to present that shield wall. But the body is taking the weight, which allows the hands to be utilized in combat, right? They can just use the hands to man the sarissa. They don't have to, it's not taking the extra weight of the shield, even though it's a much smaller shield, I might add. And they had quite heavy butt spikes, as you can see, as a counterweight. Now, when the Macedonian phalanx will engage, the first five ranks are going to put their spears down, and and everyone else will be holding in varying degrees from 45 to 90 degrees and move forward. So this is now the and it's possible that the spears of the enemy might only reach here when first contact is made. So the men are pretty safe. And these are able to deflect quite well enemy projectiles, which makes the Macedonian phalanx literally like an unstoppable battering ram in perfect conditions.
I mean, for
Yes.
audience members who maybe don't know ancient Greek warfare as much, overly simplifying, what Philipp's done is he's made basically the Phalanx 2.0. He's kind of
Pretty much.
perfected it, basically. And any other phalanxes that all the other Greek city states have their own variations, but they're pretty much similar in scope.
They, they were actually the difference is he went lighter for longer
Yeah.
weapons, whereas most Greek states, when they were reforming their phalanx, it just went for heavy, more heavily armed men. So it just kind of becomes an indecisive slogging match.
But for people who don't kind of like, if you have to think about the logistics of this, you have lighter equipment, meaning that these guys are putting less effort. They can go longer, they can go faster. It's a
And not to
significant
mention the
improvement.
training.
Yeah.
They trained throughout the year. This is the first professional army, at least in the Western world, that you could say, right? Because I don't know about ancient China and such.
Mm.
Because most kingdoms, nations, right, you'll just have a small elite guard and the rest are your citizen militia.
Hmm. Hmm.
Even Rome is not going to professionalize its army for another 200 years.
Yeah.
Now, this is one unit, and then this is the representation of the hypaspists. These are the top notch, the elites. Now, while they are equipped exactly like a hoplite, they are way more fit, they are way more capable. And I think the best way was when we could do maybe a future Alexander the Great series. These guys, the way Alexander would utilize them as kind of like special forces rather than anything else. They would be able to march like 60, 65 kilometers in the desert, obviously without the armor. They would be the first forces breaking into sieges, and they are more flexible than a traditional hoplite in the way that they fight, which gives them an added edge to be used as also shock troops. Now, there's another great thing that I have to say about Philip is his diplomacy. He was very opportunistic and smart with diplomacy. As eager as he was with campaigning with his army to beat back his enemies, he took diplomacy with equal vigor and was quite successful. So, through diplomacy and interventions, he knew when to make peace with his neighbors of the various tribes around Macedonia, the Thracians, or the Thessalians, or the Athenians. Now, that is why I think he was able to make Macedonia that the power that would become that. One moment. God damn it, I had a great picture. Yep. So if you count all the red and Thessaly, that is what he made Macedonia at the time of Chaeronea. He would know when to engage diplomatically and make peace, close on a front, focus on the enemy, and when to opportunistically outmaneuver his opponents. Now, this actually is pretty key in the build up to the Chaeronea campaign. Now, what happens is the Third Sacred War takes place. So, this is a war between the Phocian Confederation, which is around here, somewhere just near Thebes, right? Because the Amphictyonic League, which is a pan-Hellenic religious organization, which, they monitor and keep sacred all the sacred sites. So like, the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, right? That's the biggest one. As I think I'll just also add a picture of. So yeah, this is like Delphi, which is the most sacred site for the Greeks, where you had the Pythia, who would be your soothsayer and everything. So the fine was put on to the Phocians for the illegal cultivation on sacred land. And the Phocians said, yeah, we are guilty of it, but they refused to pay because the fine was they just could not afford to do it. Now, what the Phocians did was they said, screw it. They raided the temples and all the sacred sites and they plundered it, got the money, and hired a large number of mercenaries to, you know, defend it. This was on the urging of Philomelius. He was a citizen, and he was the one who kind of pushed this idea forward. And the ultimate goal of the Phocians was to take control of the Amphictyonic League, and they'll take the control of the league, and then they are going to be like, "Yep, we're just gonna forgive ourselves." Pretty good strategy. So Philomenes would be, appointed as a general for the Phocian armies, and he would be supported by Onaramachos, and these two would actually be pretty capable generals. And in 356, 357 BC, you have this third sacred war starts. Now, the first two phases of the war, I'm not going to get into because that does not concern Philip. But the Phocians generally just held a pretty successful campaign against everybody. And this was a league that included the Boeotian League, Thebes, Thessaly, Doris, and others. Though later, when Philip gets involved, we will see the Athenians and Spartans sending support to Phocians because you don't want, your enemies to get too powerful. Now, in 354 BC, that's where our boy Philip comes into power. Now, the Thessalian Confederation, right? So this entire league, right? So they're a confederation of states. They were also moving, but the thing is, the city of Pherae over here, they have not gone in with the rest of the league. They are actually allied with the Phocians. So they are fighting against the Amphictyonic League, and it is the city of Larissa that appeals to Philip to help them defeat Pherae. This is the way Philip gets his justification to come into the conflict in southern Greece. Now, the Phocians do respond to Pherae's um, request for aid, and Onamarchos dispatches his brother and 7,000 men. However, Philip does beat this force back. And then this causes Onamarchos himself to come up north with the rest of his army, abandoning some sieges in the central Greek regions. And, he gets his entire force to attack Thessaly. And now it's possible both probably had the same goals, right? Both wanted to probably capture Thessaly itself. And it is said that Onarmachus got about 21,000 men, including about 500 to 1,000 cavalry, and a large number of catapults. And this actually outnumbered Philip's army. And the exact details, unfortunately, are lost to us about how this campaign panned out. But it seems that there were two defeats, pretty large defeats inflicted on Philip, with many of his men dead. And when winter came in, he did retreat. And what Philip did said to have said, he did not run away, but like a ram, I pulled back to butt again harder. If you get a beating and you can survive, better make sure you learn from it. Now, Philip returns in the summer of 353 or 352 BC. We are not sure of the exact year because records kind of just vary by this 1 year. And he gets a new army. And he requests the Thessalian League to join him. Now, they are kind of underwhelmed by what Philip did last year, right? If you got your ass whooped twice, why should we join you? But they don't have a choice because it's either Philip or the Phocians taking over. And then now Philip and mustered all the Thessalian opponents of Pherae, and he has an army of about 23 to 25,000 men. And it is at this decisive battle, as we see here, battle at the field of Crocus, where Philip inflicts a crushing victory for himself and devastating defeat against the Phocians. And this is in spite of Athens now also joining in and dispatching aid and allies to the Phocian forces here. And in the battle, it is sent, Philip loses maybe 1,500 men, but inflicts about 9,000 casualties with 6,000 of them being killed, including and 3,000 prisoners, which included Onaramorcus himself, who was later hanged or crucified. And the other prisoners, well, they weren't ransomed, they were drowned.
God damn.
Yep, because the ritual was that these guys are temple robbers, right? So they are following the Hellenistic religious codes of the Amphitryonic League, which, let's be honest, they would be expecting severe retribution if they failed.
I mean,
That's kind of why the
yeah, there is another
yeah,
element to it though, because Philip II is obsessed with trying to present himself as being amongst the
this champion.
civilized Greeks, and he wants the Greeks to accept the Macedonians as kind of the same group of people because he envisions if he conquers any territory in Greece that these people won't, respect his authority if they think he's a northern barbarian, which they think he is. So he kind of goes overboard with the getting the Greek art, getting all the muse, everything. He brings all this stuff. He has these
He
banquets,
takes it to the next level from his predecessors.
He kind of like overdoes being Greek in a way. So yeah.
True enough. And it is after this battle, he's now made the Archon of the Thessalian League, which is huge given the fact that the Thessalian cavalry will play a massive role for his son's campaigns in the future. Now, he kind of settles the affairs here, but is not really getting too much involved in the rest of the war. But, he then starts to move down. And as he's approaching the Thermopylae Pass, the Athenians kind of panic because if he takes the pass at Thermopylae, he's opened the gateway into southern Greece. And so, what the Athenians do is they dispatch an embassy to Philip, which includes Philocrates, Demosthenes, and Aeneas to Philip to discuss peace between them. Now, this embassy will have two audiences with Philip, and in which each side presented the proposals for the terms of a peace settlement. And then the embassy returned to Athens to present the terms proposed to the Athenian assembly, along with the Macedonian embassy empowered by Philip to finalize the agreement. On 23rd April, it is said that they would be swearing the peace. Now, after agreeing to these terms, the Athenians now dispatched a second embassy to extract the same oaths of peace from Philip and his court. So they will be going up to Pella to, do this. Now, what these guys go at a pretty relaxed pace because they think Philip is campaigning around here in Thrace. So, they can go. But when they arrive, which includes Demosthenes and Aeneas again, they are kind of surprised that you have all the third sacred war combatants cities, all the major players have their embassies over here. So, it's a big delegation and diplomatic event that's going to go happen in the court of Pella. And now when Philip returns, he receives all the embassies together. Now the Thebans and Thessalians request that Philip officially take leadership of the Amphitryonic League. Now this is going to be a big boost, right, if he gets this, because he's now being asked to take the leadership of a pan-Hellenic religious organization. And, to punish forces hard. Whereas conversely, forces and who are supported by the Spartans and Athenians plead for mercy and not to attack forces. Now Philip is now showing his diplomatic arm here. delays making any decisions as he sought by every means not to reveal how he intended to settle things. Both sides were privately encouraged to hope that he would do as they wanted, but both were bidden not to prepare for a war. A peacefully arranged concordat was at hand. And he delays taking the oaths to the peace of Philocrates, which is going to be that peace treaty that was sworn in by the Athenian assembly. And, you know, uh, it's gonna look there's gonna be a nice reversal. Now, the ambassadors are also noticing at Pella there are military preparations, right? The soldiers are equipping themselves. There's drills, supplies are being gathered. Now, what Philip does tell the ambassadors they were campaign against the city of Halys, which is a small city in the Thessalian League, which has still not submitted to his authority. And then he departs for Halys, before making any pronouncements, and thus compels the uh, Athenian embassies to kind of go with him because they need to, take that oath in person from him. It is only at Pherae he does take the oaths as requested. But it is in the aftermath where Philip puts the coup de grace. But while he convinced them that he's going for a Thessalian city, he's actually going for the Thermopylae Pass right here. He never had any intention of that Thessalian city.
Of course.
And so when he swore the oaths to these ambassadors, his forward units and vanguard were already pretty close to the pass itself. And by the time the Athenian ambassadors arrive home in July, Philip is already in possession of the pass. By delaying the oaths and making what seemed like an effective feint against Halys, and he prevents the Athenians from garrisoning the Thermopylae Pass themselves, which will ensure that he has an open route to Greece. Now all of Greece is at his mercy. No one is strong enough individually to take him. And they can't even save forces, even if they abandon the peace. And the Athenian assembly kind of just shows how dumb they are. They reject the peace and try to declare war. And it is not until the 12th of July where, Philip's armies come even closer do they finally realize that, guys, we can't fight Philip. Let's just reaffirm the peace of Philocrates. It's not a popular peace, but it ends. And one of the biggest things is he gets the city of Amphipolis around this time, which has been in his possession for a few years, but it's now on a treaty. Now that he was in control, Philip is able to dictate the spoils of the sacred war. So he makes, the truces with Philakios, who surrenders focus to him, and Philip allows that man and his mercenaries to go wherever he wished. And, for ending the war, Macedon was made the member of the League officially and given 2 votes, which had been stripped from the city of Phocis itself. Now, as you said, Greg, the Macedonian kings, especially Philip, did everything they could do to be seen as civilized Greeks and not northern barbarians. Now, by membership of this league, it technically does mean that the Macedonians are not barbarians anymore. The terms imposed on Phocis were harsh, but he doesn't really have any choice because the Thessalians and Thebans, they kind of want a bloodbath. And he could not, lose risking them. However, with a good move of diplomacy, which will pay off in this upcoming campaign of Chaeronea, the terms are not as brutal as everyone hoped. So, the some people said that the temple robbers, were to be thrown over a cliff, which was the traditional punishment. But aside from being expelled from the council, all Phocian cities were to be destroyed, and they were settled into villages of no more than 50 houses. And the money stolen from the temples was to be repaid at a rate of 60 talents a year, which broadly you could say is about 1,000 pounds, sorry, 1,000 kgs or so of gold per year. However, he did not destroy the Phocians and they retained the land. Now, the Athenians were also not penalized, and the Spartans also got a light slap on the wrist. Again, he's playing the diplomatic card, so he's punished the main antagonistic of faction of the third sacred war relatively harshly, but the others, so that that leniency would generate some goodwill. Now some of the Phocians would leave, like not like him, but unfortunately, this is all what it is. Now, this peace that has been signed, right, in the aftermath of Chaeronea is not popular with the Athenians. So Philipp's actions had not bought peace, but it has expanded his, uh, role within the Greek world, which was not to the liking of a certain Demosthenes of Athens. Now, Craig, I think you'd really like to speak about this very
Yeah,
influential figure.
he's definitely gonna be kind of a nefarious figure, I guess you could say. Here, let me just find an image of him. Yes, for this guy, I also could only find a bust, but it's actually a very good one. It's very well made. Here he is. Demosthenes, obviously prominent Athenian orator and statesman. I guess you could say in many ways he was one of the great speakers of Athens of his day, probably the greatest. And he was renowned for, his eloquence and his fierce opposition, specifically at the Macedonian expansion under Philip II. And actually, I don't want to go into the future too much, but he's going to be around during Alexander the Great, and he's going to be quite a pest. He's kind of, I'm just going to say it, he's a bit of a shithead, this guy.
Oh, definitely, I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
But he was also one of those rare leaders at this time that was pretty pathetic as a soldier,
Yeah.
but a brilliant orator. Like he was able to sway the masses, and it's probably not related to this, but the reason Thebes gets destroyed under Alexander the Great, it's thanks to this guy as well.
Yeah. Unfortunately, he couldn't move very fast with all the Persian gold in his pockets, so it had held him down. But yeah, he was born in 384 BC, or at least we assume, and apparently he overcame a speech impediment through rigorous practice, and he would obviously become one of the greatest public speakers in Athens as well as Greece. I mean, I'll give it to him; he was definitely a great speaker. His political career really hit off. And he was one of those, who was advocating for Athenian independence in a time when that is odd to think. It's not the way we would think of independence, but anyways, he was definitely part of a lot of movements as such. He's of course best known for his speeches, which were called the Philippics. I think that's how it would be pronounced, where he warned all the other Greek city-states of the growing threat of Macedonia. So he's kind of, I guess you could say he's kind of like Cato, always just going on
I was
about,
actually just thinking
yeah,
about that.
Delenda es Carthago. He's like, yeah, we gotta destroy Macedon. But yeah, so he was always out there.
Macedon delanda est.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be him. So he's making these fiery, passionate speeches about, why they are northern barbarians. They're not Greeks. Philip is nothing but a brute and a thug, and that they should all basically band together to defeat Philip. I'm not going to go in. Well, I'll just speak a little bit about this because I guess it's not about what we're talking about, but this guy's career is he's gonna be involved with so many conspiracies. For example, hey, you ever hear me talk about some great Pacific War movie or documentary like Pearl Harbor Minute by Minute over on Netflix and feel the urge to watch it for yourself? Uh-oh, you live in Japan and your Netflix doesn't have it? Must suck to be you.
Sucks to be me right now.
Oh wow, season 4 of Demon Slayer is out. Oh wait, I can't watch it on Canadian Netflix, but it's over on Japan Netflix? Whatever will I do?
Oh, no.
Being blocked from regional content? With private internet access, you too can watch Demon Slayer Season 4 by switching your IP address to Japan.
Yes! Hell yeah!
Why stop with Japan? With private internet access, you can change your IP address to over 84 different countries and every single US state, giving you access to region-restricted content all over the world.
Nice.
Many websites and services like Netflix are only accessible depending on your physical location, but private internet access helps you overcome these restrictions. Think about it, without private internet access, it's like paying for a TV series and missing out on the latest season. Shots fired, Demon Slayer on Canadian Netflix.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
Ever fear people are gonna find your Google searches?
Banzai! Banzai! Banzai!
Private internet access makes sure that those Google searches remain a buried secret, as private internet access encrypts your internet access and has a no logs policy. Think you're safe with the local coffee shop's free Wi-Fi? No, you are certainly not. Private internet access gives you more privacy features than any other software, and real-time protection from malware and trackers, giving you peace of mind knowing those Google searches remain seen by you and you alone. Private internet access has a no-log policy that they've defended in court, which means they are not storing any of your browsing data. Hey, are you like me using different devices under one household? Private internet access is available on all platforms and protects an unlimited amount of devices at the same time. I personally use private internet access to unblock movies and TV series from all across the globe, and I sleep easier writing scripts for my YouTube channel and others knowing my data is secure. Look, this is a no-brainer. Sign up with my link in the description of this video to get 83% off, plus 4 months for free, so it ends up being only around $2 per month. Signing up for private internet access is risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, and 24/7 customer support is available. So don't forget to click www.piavpn.com/the Pacific War Channel, and a big thanks to Private Internet Access for sponsoring this video. I mean, I don't think it gives away anything, but Philip II will meet an end that leads to Alexander the Great's rise, and of the many rumors as to who might have killed Philip II, this guy might have been involved somewhat. He might have been, alongside some Persian money doing something. No one really knows for sure, but he's often cast as this shadowy figure who has a chip on his shoulder against the family of Alexander the Great and will continuously screw with them, and even on behalf of the Persians. And that's all I'll say about him.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to summarize this very great speaker
Yeah.
who is going to be responsible for Alexander completely destroying his ally.
And I mean, devastating, tragic what happens to the Thebes. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, he's kind of also slimeball because he wants only Athens to really gain, not really even Thebes or Sparta, even though they're they have two equal Greeks. It's probably, you might have the Dorian versus Ionian kind of problems, but I'll just say this. When Alexander the Great besieges Thebes, when he's king, Demosthenes promises the Thebans that the Athenians are mustering a larger coalition force, which never came close to the city. Very nice, right? Just getting back to sharing.
And I'll just say this to the audience. I'm aware that we're covering a topic that kind of recently, Dan Carlin had like a two-piece series covering the rise of Philip II and the early rise of Alexander the Great. So I hope we're doing this justice, because I recently listened to that, and I have to recommend it. It's a terrific account of everything that we're kind of talking about.
True. Now, I think in the build-up to the Battle of Chaeronea, so it's around 339 BC. Now, Philip needs some pretense to continue to expand his influence and control over the Greeks. His ultimate selfish goal is he needs to get them on board with his planned invasion of the Persian Empire, which is anyways his way of solidifying his claim to be one of the Greeks. The Persians invaded us 150 years ago. Let's do that again and get our revenge. Now, around 339 BC, Philip is in Thrace conducting a dual siege of Perinthus and Byzantium for not failing to send troops to fulfill their obligations to him. It's an indecisive few months, because the lack of a Macedonian navy means that the Persians and Athenians are sending a lot of supplies of food, weapons, money to the two cities. Now, this after a while, he pulls back, and the Athenians, they go wild and celebrating. They're like, "Yeah, we beat this goddamn barbarian. We don't need anything." But Philip had already been planning for a campaign into southern Greece. Now, he gets linked to now the fourth sacred war that takes place, where is the citizens of Amphissa in Lorcas began cultivating land sacred to Apollo in the plains south of Delphi. And what happens is the Amphictyonic League decides that Amphissa is in the wrong and we need to declare war. Now, a Thessalian delegate proposed that Philip should be made leader of the Amphictyonic Council's efforts, which gave him the convenient excuse that he can now enter southern Greece because he's been asked by the league that he's a member of to be its leader in the military campaign. So this is good for him, right, in the justification of war. Now, at the start of 339 BC, while he was here, Philip, the Thebans and Athenians are now raising their forces openly against Philip. What happens is around Thermopylae and a few other passes nearby, they garrison them strongly with their forces and mercenaries. And Philip does not seem to have wanted to, declare war on them yet, but this does pose a problem because he can no longer use the Thermopylae pass. It's well bottled up. However, what happens is while the Thermopylae pass is there, the Greeks, for some reason, did not bottle this pass, which is on the shoulder of Mount Calidromos, which allowed Philip to go. So what Philip does is absolute genius, if you ask me. He advances near Thermopylae and then withdraws. As I said quite earlier in the video, Philip's agents now come to life. They start spreading the rumor that he's gone, he's done, he doesn't want to fight, he's not coming back anytime soon. And this is where the Theban and Athenian soldiers garrisoning these various cities and all around this area, they become very complacent. And after a couple of weeks of not seeing any Macedonians come back, like, yeah, we're done. Many men, abandon the posts and withdraw. Garrisons become completely lax, and lo and behold, guess who just feigned a withdrawal and has come back in full force with a battle-hardened army? Philip of Macedon. And this is a pretty powerful force when we'll discuss as the battle build up. And, as he struck, the all passes and he makes attempt invasions to the Thermopylae, the Scalidromos route, and he also does, go and take over Amphissa. Now, even though the Phocians still kind of hated him a bit, the relatively lenient treatment that they got, because they know if it was someone else, they would have been way worse off. The treatment he gave to the Phocians in 346 BC after the Third Sacred War ended bore immense fruit for this. So once he reaches the city of Elatia here, he populated it and, restores the Phocian Confederation overall to its old legacy. And he's now here, and it's November 339 BC. And, he spends the next few months as it's like winter, so the army cannot move. He discharges his political duties to, to the Amphictyonic League and settling all the matters in Amphissa. And, he returns it to Delphi. And he tries to dissuade the other city-states, especially those in the Peloponnese and in southern Greece, to not intervene in the coming fight. And he still tries to make peace offers to the Athenians and the Thebans because he wants a united front. And he needs the powerful Athenian navy. He also needs the pretty strong Theban army at his side. Now, he doesn't declare war also yet. There's still no official declaration of war on the Thebans. And even though at Elatea in November and the Greeks around Lebda and Chaeronea, as we can see on the map, and it's separated by a 3 days march, the Thebans actually had a good way to get out. It's only Athens that's at war right now. So they can just withdraw without doing anything, and there's no any legal repercussion or moral repercussion that could be followed. The Thebans get kind of influenced by Demosthenes, and they ally with Athens, which is a first, given that the Thebans and Athenians pretty much loathe each other. And then, the Athenian army has now reinforced the Theban army, and they do march here. Now, Philip we don't know too much of the details. As it says, maybe the mountain passes blocked Philip's advances, as they did to the Spartans at Lectrua. But there were definitely some skirmishes that would have no doubt taken place, because that's just the norm. You build up, try to get the edge, or find battleground of your choosing. And our great Demosthenes alludes to a winter battle or a battle on the river in his speeches, but there's no real details preserved, and what Demosthenes probably said, we should take it with a big grain of salt. I think that would have been useful for Carthage. And finally, in August 338 BC, Philip's army marches straight down from Elatea to, towards Boeotia to assault the allied army of Charon that is assembled at Chaeronea. Now, just give me a second. I want to talk about the army dispositions. As you can see here, while it's not exactly shown properly, the allies were also arranged in a kind of oblique manner. So in the Greeks, and they chose the site well, because you have the mountain here that guards the flank, and then you have the river. So it is going to represent you, against any flanking attacks by the companion cavalry. Now, they plan to fight defensive, and we had the Athenians man the left flank of their army, and it is about 12,000 well-equipped hoplites. So the state financed these guys. They bought them state-of-the-art weaponry and armor. So it's a pretty strong fighting force and pretty large as well. But crucially, they're not experienced soldiers. This is literally the first time many of them are going to even see combat. And the center is having contingents from other allied cities. So that includes Achaia, Corinth, Megara, Tonsin, Epidaurus, and a few other Athenians and such. The center of the line around here is about 7,000-8,000 hoplites as well. Again, most of them, and it also includes mercenary contingents, and they are pretty much financed by the Athenians as well. The right wing were the Thebans, and they were the largest Greek concentration with between 15 to 18,000 men. And you had them on their most far right was the Theban sacred band, or as I sometimes call it, the Theban boy band. Now, I'll just say that because I want to talk a little bit of this unit.
Mm-hmm.
The left flank was commanded by Lysimachus of Athens, the center by Charis of Athens, and the Thebans were under their general Tigranes. They did not play a real role, which is why I'm not asked as a usual, personality details. But the Theban sacred band, now they were 300 men handpicked, for pure ability of merit, and there was no social classes to them. So even if you were poor but very good, you will probably be equipped by the state. Now, they were supposed to be consisting of 150 male couples, and which, according to Plutarch, had an older Erastes, who was the lover, and a younger Eromenes, who is the beloved. Now, another historian, Athenaeus of Naucritas, also says that the sacred bands was composed of lovers and their favorites, thus indicating the dignity of the god Eros in the play in that they embrace a glorious death in preference to fighting and leaving the battlefield in a dishonorable way. It's kind of like how that Spartan soldier after the fall of Thermopylae, was looked at. Now, another third historian, Polyaenus, describes the sacred band as being composed of men devoted to each other by mutual obligations of love. Now, the term for the sacred is unexplained by some historians, but Plutarch claims it was due to the exchange of sacred vows between the lover and the beloved at the shrine of Aeolus, who was a lover of Heracles himself at Thebes. And he also mentions Plato's characterization of the lover as a friend inspired of God. Now, regardless of what we might call this unit, right, with today's views, I'm sorry, because back then it was completely fine. These were probably, as a fighting unit, the most battle-hardened, battle-worthy unit on the field. And this is even if you consider Philip and his royal guard, the royal squadrons of the companion cavalry, these 300 pound for pound were the most capable fighting force that we will see. They are not to be underestimated at any cost. It was the sacred band that led the breaking of the Spartans of Lectura. So they're the guys that broke the Spartan super soldier mirage, as my friend likes to call them. So overall, as we could say that the Greek coalition numbers about 36,000 men. Unknown number of cavalry, but it's estimated probably very minuscule amounts. The Greeks were predominantly going to be a foot force. Now, with regards to the Macedonian army, they were about 32,000 men, 30,000 of them being infantry. The right flank was commanded by Philip of Macedon himself, and he had about 1,000 missile troops and 67,000 soldiers, which were a mix of the Hypaspists, who were the hoplite armed infantry, and a few battalions of the Pesetyra, the foot companions, to form small groups of phalanx squads. And now these men were ultimately the best Macedonian troops available. The center consisted the two major blocks of the foot companions and the Macedonian phalanx arranged in. Now they were arranged 15 to 20 ranks deep, which is 2 times as deep as the traditional Greek formation of about 8 to 12. And armed with the sarissa, that's game over if you ask me. Especially since you have cavalry and to protect you, and also there's less chances of outflanking. The left flank and the center is also, the total strength is about 15,000 men. And knowing how traditionally the Macedonians did array themselves, there would have been, like, you could say 10 blocks of men, about 1,500 each. These were like kind of like the battalionish equivalents of their army. The left flank was commanded by then 17-year-old Prince Alexander III. His force had about 5,000-6,000 men, similar infantry composition as his father, but not the pick of the cream of the infantry, but still very capable men. And about 22, and most of the cavalry of the Macedonians, which included, at this battle, it was said about 1,700 companion cavalry and about 500-600 Thessalian cavalry. He also had a screen of 1,000 missile troops as well. Greg, do you want to talk a little bit of Alexander? I know we can't go too overboard because his exploits are still yet to come.
I mean, what's there to say about this lesser known individual, just a 17-year-old boy of insignificance to anything really, right?
Yeah.
Here, I'm just going to
It's,
put a picture up, and yeah, for the audience, I
I
was
do
just
actually have some pictures I can show.
oh, here, well, yeah, you
So
could
this
throw
is,
throw up a
yeah,
few
one of
pictures.
his, then his famous class.
Yeah, I'm just
But
putting up
I
an
think
artistic rendition of what he might have looked like, which
I think
is
I
up to
have.
scrutiny.
Can you see this picture? Because it's famous incident with Bucephalus.
Here one. Let me stop sharing. Here, put it up. Yeah.
Let's see.
Is that an AI made picture? I would just.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking at
It
the horse. I would imagine. Yeah.
definitely is, but it does because it was at his young age where he was still
Yeah.
being tutored. Alexander has a famous incident with Bucephalus, which at that time his father was present because keep in mind Philip was not really an active father because he was
Mm.
camping away
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah. To say the
He
least.
usually would, but it is at this, I think he was home and Philip did see a lot of men get their ass kicked by Bucephalus. And when Alexander does ask permission of his father to go and, you know, tame the horse, Philip was actually pretty nervous about this because, and quite a lot of the courtiers as well, you don't want the young prince to get kicked by the horse and possibly die.
Definitely. Yeah.
But as we know, Alexander was able to tame Bucephalus by moving him away from his shadow and was able to successfully mount him. That it is said Philip, was streaming tears of joy at the son's accomplishment.
Mhm.
Now, in his early years, though, I think one thing I gotta say first is the day Alexander was born, or rather, not the day he was born, because we know that there's the famous story that the day he was apparently conceived, uh, you know, lightning hit the room where Philip and Olympias were having intercourse, and that is like, they say is the divine intervention of Zeus coming in, kind of feeling, Alexander's later future godhood megalomania.
Well, Olivia said that Zeus was the father and not Philip II, basically. That was her position and all of that. But yeah,
True enough, but let's just leave it that Olympia was a very tough and brutal and savage woman.
she was a witch. She was a witch.
Yeah. I mean, apparently it says that the honeymoon of Philip and Olympias, I think when he comes to the bedroom, he sees snakes.
Yeah.
But so it is said that when the news comes, right? So Philip had just completed the siege of Portadea on the peninsula of Chalcis. So he gets three horsemen coming to his command tent, right, with messages. So first he gets the news Parmenion has defeated a large enemy army of the Illyrian and Pannonians. The second arms news says, his son Alexander is born. As the horses that he entered into the Olympic Games sponsored by him won the races. So guess who? And he's also just celebrating a victory, right? He's taken a city. Guess which messenger got him the most joy that day?
The victory of the horse.
Obviously,
Yeah.
yeah. Now, Olympias at this time was also the principal wife, so it's important because he has seven, eight wives. But as a principal wife, this means that he is technically the heir presumptive to the throne.
For now.
Yeah, for now. Now, Alexander would be raised by a nurse, Laniki, who is the sister of a future general, Clytus. And his mom took a pretty active role in his tutoring, which was, um, you know, raised by a man called Leonidas, and then by Lysimachus of Acarnania. So he was taught in the same way of any typical Macedonian noble youth, to read, play the lyre, ride, fight, and hunt. And it was at 10 years old where he had this famous incident with Bucephalus. And at the age of 13, Philip began searching for a tutor. And, this will be Aristotle coming.
Hmm.
And, in return for agreeing to tutor Alexander, Philip agreed to rebuild Aristotle's hometown of Stagaria, which Philip had razed, and repopulated by buying and freeing the ex-citizens who were slaves or were given pardons to return from exile. And at that time, Alexander also starts to get exposed to the Persians, because there were several nobles from the Persian Achaemenid Empire which were being harbored as fugitives in the court at Pella. And it's also here that he starts forming the bond of his key companions, such as, Ptolemy, Hephaestion, and Cassander. So, and it's at the age of 16, so 3 years after learning with Aristotle, Alexander starts accompanying Philip against in battle. So the first conflicts of Alexander, he's fighting the Thracians at the age of 16, in which left Alexander in charge of as regent as well. And it was said that during his absence, the Thracian tribe of the Mede revolted against Macedonia, and Alexander, raised a quick army, defeated them in battle, supposedly leading the charge himself, because that's what Alexander does. And won the day quite well. And he also would be later dispatched by his father to subdue revolts in southern Thrace. So does show that the father is having quite a good amount of trust as well, and he's proving it. Oh, and also when he defeated that tribe, he founded a city called Alexandropolis.
Yeah, he's gonna find about what 25 more cities. He's gonna name similarly,
Now,
except for the one that he named after his horse. That one,
so that also had the Alexandria in its name also.
still, yeah.
But so this is like the boy who would become the king, and it's just sad that Philip is just remembered as his father, even though this is also his moment.
I will note that the one thing that like the general public understands about Alexander is that he fought from the front, he led, but he kind of got that from his dad. And I mean, his dad, how much injury he loses his eye, he breaks, I think he breaks
Yeah,
something in
this
his
is, I think, a good
leg.
image of Philip with
Yeah.
the lost eye.
They Dan Carlin referred to him as a Frankenstein monster by the end because he was just like he could barely move. He was so broken up.
True, but that's why the Macedonians loved him also, because it
Yeah.
still showed that ruggedness.
Yep.
And a king that leads from the front, because that kind of loyalty is not bought
Yeah, exactly.
or demanded, it's earned.
Yeah.
So I think that's really a good thing. And this, just like I thought I should have shown, this is like some artistic depiction of a couple within the sacred band. Now, back to the battle. I read this in a book. I don't remember the author, but it was like this entire 300, 400 page book of the life of Alexander the Great. So it is set in the day before the battle, when, as I mentioned, Alexander has about 2,200 cavalry and 5,000, 6,000 infantry and maybe 1,000 missile troops. So in the command tent before the battle, he's there because he's commander of the left wing. Philip gives him quite a large chunk of the army. So it would have been like he is giving him around uh, 12 to 15,000 infantry and the cavalry. And I think one of the key companions of Alexander said the night before, it's like, your father dishonors you quite so much by giving you so much men. It means he doesn't trust you to do the job. And Alexander just nonchalantly says, oh, just wait. I'm not even bothered. At the dawn of morning, about half of them will be redeployed to the right and center. Guess what happened? He was right. But he was not completely, on his own. Sure, he does have some experience down leading and commanding an army and wing, but he is still assisted by some veteran generals as well. Though the main will still be with Philip and the Macedonian elites, Alexander is not unsupported. Now, the day when the battle starts, it's actually just the right wing of Philip that advances against the Athenians. So he's also keeping a slanted formation. So the left wing is abs and should actually be here, right? And it's kind of moving at a slant with the right flank advancing. Philip's orders to Alexander before the battle was, you do as you want, but look for the opportune moment to strike. That was it. Now, as Philip advances, the people would wonder, why would he do that? 17-year-old, but he's proven himself, as I said. Now, first, the missile troops engaged the Athenians packed in their hoplite phalanxes. And to their credit, the Athenians hold their ground right now. They're not taking the bait. Even though traditionally you would see when you're getting pelted by arrows, javelins, and everything, you kind of want to break and attack because you just don't want to be suffering the hail of fire. Even though against such heavily armored men, they're not supremely effective. They're just more of a nuisance right now. And the Macedonians are not as heavily equipped as the Athenian hoplites, and they are actually outnumbered right now. But credit, the Athenians did hold themselves. And they then engage into conflict as the missile troops retreat, with the phalanx of Philip and the phalanx of the Athenians engaging in combat. And after a bit of a charge and a melee, Philip orders a withdrawal. And it was around this time also, as Philip had advanced, Alexander had also ordered his left and also the army center to advance, but still keep in contact with Philip's contingent. They don't want Philip to be too isolated, but he's still keeping that slant in their formation. So he's still the furthest, his wing is still the furthest back from the battle. Now, this is actually pretty good because Philip has now in no danger of being encircled by the center, because if Alexander had not advanced, the entire center could easily wheel about, surround Philip, and crush him. He would be massively outnumbered. But Philip, so probably to the surprise of the entire Greek coalition, orders a withdrawal. He says, "We are retreating." Now, the Macedonians are not at all broken, but they follow the king's orders and they begin an organized retreat. It's a planned, organized retreat. It's not like a panic that happens with so many other armies. But to the Athenians, especially these recruits who are fighting for the first time, what do you think is just going through their mind? Oh, Ares loves us. We have beaten the Macedonians. This northern barbarian has no chance of beating our figure. Now, this is then they start moving forward quite aggressively. So the phalanx still exists, but it's starting to lose its cohesion. And
Yeah,
as we've said,
it loosens up because they're
it's
glory hunting. Because as we all know, in ancient and medieval warfare, the casualties, like 90% of which are occurred during the retreat. So yeah, they're trying to
exactly.
follow up. Yeah.
But they are trying to follow up and they're elated, right? You pushed back this barbarian and his veteran army, right? Everyone has been knowing about how much Philip has beaten the Thracians, Pannonians, Thessalians, Greeks, etc. Like, this is great. I'm pretty sure Demosthenes, who was fighting as a hoplite, so he had no command position, but it's just a standard hoplite, probably would have been in this flank with the main Athenian contingent. I'm pretty sure in his head he's like, "See, I riled up the city for against this guy and he's weak. I am correct all the time." Now, the Athenians for now are still keeping formation, but they are being withdrawn. It's loosening up. So the efficacy of the phalanx and its integrity is being destroyed. Now, when Alexander sees his father order the retreat, he also halts his men and orders them to start their withdrawal as well. Now, this is where things get really interesting. Now, Chaeronea of Athens, who commands the center forces, which is predominantly the other Greek city-states and the mercenaries, right? This 9,000 contingent of hoplites. He's now present in a conundrum because the further away the Macedonians retreat, the further away the Athenians are from the main Greek battle line and are going to be unsupported. But now he has to choose whether he's going to stay put and stay with the Thebans or move to support the Athenians in their pursuit of the Macedonians. Right? Because they are at the risk of being isolated themselves now. Now, what ends up happening is about half of them rush forward and start trying to engage the Macedonians at their fallback. And they will be engaging kind of like the center right of the Macedonian phalanx. And, this is where like the Greeks are probably at their morale high. They have, pushed back the barbarians who are now in full retreat. Now, this unfortunately for them is when what the Macedonians were waiting for. It is at this moment Alexander the Third. I'm not going to give him the name grade yet. He orders the charge. The left and center left units stop, wheel about, and begin advancing onto the Theban and the remainder of the center. And as this contingent had moved of the Greek center to support the Athenian flank, there's a big gap that's developed between the forces, a gap that he can exploit. Hammer and anvil, the first hammer and anvil probably in his life. And, they move forward. And this was also where Philip, also seeing his son, charge forward with his cavalry, gives the order to his men that you're not retreating anymore. We're now pushing back against the Athenians. And this is where, like, the battle has been going on for like 5 hours now, okay? At least on Philip's flank. The Athenians are tired and demoralized, and they are wearing heavier armor, as we alluded to in the Macedonian reforms. They are utterly spent. And now is when the Macedonians of Philip, even though they are outnumbered quite badly, they start, assaulting the Athenians that we see here. This unit, by the time they arrive, they are not running into like a retreating Macedonian phalanx box. They're attacking a waiting phalanx with its sarissas out in full formation. The steamroller has begun. And, this is where, the other blocks and the Athenians soon lose their will to fight, and this entire half of the army pretty much disintegrates at this point within, a short span of time. While at the same time, Alexander's center left and left start engaging the Theban army. But his cavalry that managed to get across, they fall on the Greek center from the rear while it's engaged with this phalanx units here. And moment you outflank and hit a phalanx from the rear and from the sides, it's finished. It has no way because the men cannot defend themselves in that angle. That entire area was wiped clean. They fled in mass, and this is where also the remainder of the Athenians and the other Greeks also fell. As the phalanx also started to turn in and Alexander's men steamrolled across, it kind of led to a domino effect where many Theban units also started to flee en masse, right? After seeing many of them get cut down in numbers. There was only one exception, the Sacred Band. To their credit, they did not disappoint. They fought valiantly for quite a limited time, but when you're pressed with missile troops from behind, assaulted by cavalry and infantry from multiple directions, who vastly outnumber you, it is a matter of time, but all the members of the Sacred Band were laying dead on the battlefield. They fought to the last man, which is a pretty heroic stand worthy of respect. Now, casualties for the Macedonians, even though it was a pivotal battle, the casualties were fairly light, I would say. It was just about a few thousand Greeks dead and very negligible losses for the Macedonian army. Now, in the aftermath is, the war was now effectively over. There was no force in the entire Greek world that could now oppose him, which one historian Cockwell does suggest that this is one of the most decisive battles of the ancient world. Yeah, it's in terms of casualties, it's not a bloodbath like how we would see, say, the Battle of Arausio, the Battle of Cannae, or you could even talk about Plataea for that example if you are sticking to the Greek Hellenistic world, or some of Alexander the Great's battles in the future. But it ensured that the Macedonians are now going to be the dominant force in Greece. In Athens and Corinth, records do show that they were preparing for a siege. They were hastily reconstructing defenses, getting more soldiers. However, Philip does have no intention of besieging any city or conquering them, because ultimately, Philip does need the allies. He wants to unify Greece so that they can go into the war with Persia. All right, because by now, Philip is also actively planning for that invasion. I think within the next year, if I'm not mistaken, the advance guard would be setting out. And he wants to ensure that when he's gone, not only is he able to take the Greeks with him, but they are stable, they are pacified, and they are not hostile to Macedonia, which will secure his homeland. So when first Philip marches into Thebes, which surrendered to him, and he expelled the Theban leaders who oppose him, but doesn't kill them, and welcomes back pro-Macedonian Theban leaders who had been expelled by the anti-Macedonian Theban leaders. And a Macedonian garrison is installed in the city. This is about 1,000 men or so. He also orders the Boeotian cities of Plataea and Thespe, which had been destroyed by the Thebans in previous conflicts, to be, refounded. And the Thebans kind of get the short end of the stick. They have to pay for the return of all the prisoners, which is a big drain. And while he doesn't dissolve the Boeotian Confederacy and strip Thebes of its membership, there, he does give them the unglamorous thing that they have to now come back and bury their own dead. He's not going to give their dead any honors. Now, contrast this, the Athenians got a very nice deal. The Athenians were allowed to keep their colony on Samos. Their prisoners were freed without ransom. And, there's quite a bit of a like conundrum why he was so quite harsh to Thebes in comparison to Athens. But I think I'm with the majority of what historians do say is he needs the Athenian navy.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you're gonna do an invasion of Persia, you're gonna need their boats. It's gonna come down to the
And
Athenian boats.
no one else has a navy.
Yeah.
It's like the reason Athens could actually, in 480 BC, force the other Greek states, despite Sparta's lethargy in engaging the Persians in land, is they said the Persians have given us a pretty sweet deal. We are willing to fight, but if you are not willing, we'll take the deal. And that would have meant bye-bye to 65% of the Greek fleet at Salamis. So you really need that navy. And as you'll see, it's not till Alexander conquers the Levant that he starts having a different base for naval operations. Now, Philip also makes combatants with the other states like Corinth and Chalcis, which controlled important strategic locations, and they just have to accept a Macedonian garrison. Now, he then turns to Sparta. So
I knew you had to at least sprinkle this one in. It's one of my favorite moments of history.
Yeah. Now, Sparta was, probably very weakened by now. So they still have the giant as ego, but they're not really a threat to anybody right now. The Theban invasions of the Peloponnese put paid to that. And, he is they could have taken advantage. And, so he establishes the League of Corinth in 337 BC. And, which is the states to guarantee peace and everything within Greece and provide military assistance and, cooperation with each other. And this will be the foundations of the men that will be departing for the future invasion of the Achaemenid Empire, except Sparta, because the Spartans said they don't follow, they lead. And, the famous thing is Philip says, if I invade you, you're dead. They said, if. That was the reply.
And for the audience who don't understand, the thing, one of the most famous things about the Spartans is their type of speech, which is as few words as possible, direct. So when he sends this letter or messenger, he's like, at any moment I could attack and invade your country, and they just basically send back if as a response. It's very famous.
You've seen a few other such instances, like it was said, right, when the Persians were at Thermopylae could, blot
Blot out
the
the sun,
sun, right? Then they said we'll fight in the
fight in
shade.
the shade. Yeah. Although I
So
would
I
say
feel
that's
like,
Herodotus's bullshit. I think that's Herodotus bullshit, but whatever. Yeah,
well, it kind of just sticks with their
of
general,
course.
like, attitude.
The
It's
feeling.
like
Yeah.
even the first siege of Vienna by the Ottomans,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, like the when Suleiman did not reach the city on the promised date, it was said he would be having breakfast in the cathedral. The defenders send a note saying, "Hey, your breakfast is getting cold."
Yeah. Oh man.
But this was like, Philip's is of Macedon's apex of his power.
Yeah.
He's unified Greece. Macedonia is unquestionably the most powerful state in the Greek
Hmm.
world. No one can even dare. Even if they gang up, they still are not strong enough probably to
Yeah.
take out Macedonia alone.
It was
But
said
he's now,
even the Thracians weren't messing with them, and the Thracians are a constant pest in the north.
yeah, they've got their armies beat back multiple times. Even the Pannonians, the Illyrians, everyone. And he's by 337 BC. After this, the advance guard would be going to secure the land. And in the next year, we were supposed to have Philip lead the invasion of Persia.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, while it would not come to that, but it sets the stage for his son, who would etch himself as the greatest conqueror in history
Yeah.
to take the story. But that's definitely for me on the Battle of Chaeronea.
Hmm.
Greg, thanks for supporting and being a great hostage.
Yep. Thank you. I was a hostage of a Greek city state under the Macedonian king.
But yeah, it was a pleasure. Like, Philip does deserve way more recognition than what he's given by the masses.
As does his
Mm.
wife, by the way. She's a terrifying figure, and she's hard to
Oh.
understand because everybody who wrote about her was like, she is a witch woman. It's like,
She
wow.
was brutal.
Yeah.
I don't know if say it here, but
She
the
held the
purge
empire
that
together by killing
she
people.
did, but the purge that she and Alexander would do in the aftermath of
Oh
Philip's
yeah.
is dead. I think there was even like one incident where the savagery showed that even Alexander was like, no, mom, that's not cool.
Yeah.
Because he had no qualms about the dynastic purge, but he just wanted it clean and efficient.
Yeah.
What his mom did, that's why actually, like, in the aftermath of Alexander's death,
Hmm.
when she lost protection, I think Sander, one of the generals, how he deals with her.
Yeah.
He doesn't kill her because the soldiers won't touch her because she is the mother of their beloved general,
Hmm.
their beloved king. He just left her to the families of the people she murdered.
So poetic. I mean, we're not going to talk about it here, but for the audience, if you ever really want to go through like real drama of ancient Greece, like the story of the kind of
Yes.
civil war in Greece while Alexander's campaigning and that and what she did. Oh my God. It's crazy. But before we let the audience go, I just want to repeat, if you'd like to further support us, please consider checking out the YouTube membership. Please do check out the YouTube membership over the Patreon. I would love to build that one up. It's quite lackluster compared to the booming Patreon, and it has the exact same prices, same bonuses. Although I think you get a little bit extra with the YouTube membership. There's a few unlisted episodes there. But if you join either, you get access to the exclusive podcast series. I don't know how many episodes. It's in the mid 20s now, I think, how many there are. You get early access to all the content I make. And there's a few episodes right now, including a retrospective on Call of Duty World at War, the defense of the Great Wall of China in 1933, and something else pretty soon. And of course, you get voting rights for the subjects I will tackle next. But Gaurav, thank you for doing justice to one of the greatest battles in ancient history.
My pleasure. Thanks for
Until
having me.
until next time.